Well, hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of Knowns Unknown, hosted by myself, Samuel Geddes, in Australia, and my colleague Anna Lyon in the UK. We're both journalists on opposite sides of the world, and we just hope to use this platform to explore topics and hold discussions which we feel aren't receiving the attention and coverage in the media that they deserve. And that's pretty much the beginning and end of it. So if you enjoy these discussions, or you want to request a discussion topic or an interviewee you would like us to speak with, please do let us know in the comments, and also subscribe to be notified of future episodes. And for the moment, that will be all of the housekeeping that we'll be doing. So on to our first guest. Based on the rhetoric of the Democratic Party during the Trump administration, you could be forgiven for thinking that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia had genuine reason to fear a Democrat in the White House. Since Joe Biden entered the Oval Office, however, the loud condemnations of Saudi Arabia's genocidal war in Yemen and calls for it to be treated as an international pariah over the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi have noticeably faded into the ether. What explains this bipartisan commitment to one of the world's last absolute monarchies, and how stable an absolute monarchy is it? Speaking to me from Washington, D.C. is dissident Saudi journalist and head of the Institute of Gulf Affairs, Ali Al-Ahmed. Welcome, and thank you very much for speaking.
Thank you for having me.
So is what I summarized just before a fair summary, or are there actual changes in the views of the political class in Washington towards Saudi Arabia that you've picked up on?
I think it's a fair assessment. However, been some restrictions. We just published a report on Saudi MBS, Mohammed bin Salman's effort to come to the United States, and the Biden administration refusal to allow him in. But generally, the relationship between the Saudi state, the Saudi government, and the United States remained unchanged. And the support and commitment to the survival of the Saudi monarchy is a stated policy, and the Biden administration stated it, and that gives really, cast doubts on the commitment for democracy, because you cannot be at the same time committed to defending human rights and at the same time, committed to the security of an absolute monarchy, which naturally does not give human rights. So this is really a good question, and hopefully in the process of recalibrating Saudi or American relationship or policy towards the Saudi monarchy, that can be fixed. So far, we have not seen that change. There have been voices in Congress, obviously, that are trying to place restrictions to hold some accountability, but it has not really materialized in reality. The reality is the same thing is going on. In fact, the U.S. forces have increased in their interaction with the Saudi military, and the American Yemen envoy has been very clear about his support and adaptation of the Saudi position in Yemen. You really put your finger on the spot here when you mentioned Yemen, because if you want to see any change, Yemen is the easier issue that the United States could change its policy, and it has not. It has changed wording here and there, but it has not changed the policy. Kids in Yemen are still starving. The siege continues, and the U.S. is trying to place pressure on the Yemenis to accept defeat rather than tell the Saudis to stop bombing, and that has really, even members of Congress are frustrated with the administration lack of transparency with American military role in Yemen, which is ongoing. People don't want to talk about it, but the US military continues to directly be involved in the Yemen war, or in spite the Biden commitment that they will stop, quote unquote, any offensive capabilities or support to the Saudi war in Yemen. It has not stopped, and I don't think it will stop anytime soon.
Well, it's a truism that the US-Saudi relationship is based on oil. Can you expand on what that actually means? Many people might have heard in the past of something called petrodollar recycling, which was very much.
I don't think so.
You don't think
tell
that's
you why.
Part of it? Okay.
That is, I think, a fig leaf that they try to cover the policy, because Venezuela, which is closer to the United States and geographically, and has more oil than Saudi Arabia, or China, that exchanges financially and commercially with the United States 10 times, maybe at least 10 times what Saudi Arabia sells in oil to the United States, and the Chinese economic impact on the United States is much, much greater. There is no comparison to the Saudi. Yet you see the Americans pushing the Chinese on different issues, including human rights, and laying a siege and boycott against the Venezuelans to force them to. It's not about oil. It is about something else. I think the American system is based on money. If the Chinese or the Venezuelans have invested in funding American politicians, think tanks, and even buying some reporters and pundits, I think that their situation will be different. What the policy here is really, it's a complex thing, is that the Saudi monarchy has basically said, we will give you whatever you want in exchange of protecting us. And this is what happened. The relationship is, we care about the Saudi monarchy alone. And the Saudi monarchy is willing to spend the money. And when I say spend the money, it's not only investing in the United States, but making sure that some of that money goes to the personal pockets of American officials, be they are in Congress or in government, past and present. And that's really the reason. And there is no other reason for this American support of countries like Bahrain, almost none, unconditional support for the regime in Bahrain. It is, why? Because Bahrain has money. They do. The Al Khalifa, they have money. But it is about that, about getting something for the individual politicians in the United States. If somehow Ali Ahmed gets billions of dollars, he'll make sure to buy these politicians so they change their direction.
So it's control of the wealth that comes from the oil rather than using the oil itself, right?
Yes, it is this corruption, the money corruption in American politics really makes a difference. Of course, the Saudis and the Americans worked together on strategic issues like combating the Soviet Union and other issues, but really it comes down to personal benefits of certain politicians, and if that changes, if the Saudis stop paying or they pay different people, then you will see their difference. That is really the basic reality of it. Iran has oil, but do they treat it differently in Venezuela? Even Russia has almost the same oil as Saudi Arabia, but it's treated differently. So really, it's not about money per se, or how much money that country has. It's about, is that country able to use it to buy the positions from members of Congress or administrations.
And so the Saudi royal family has agreed to send that oil wealth into the American and to a
Yes,
lesser
yes,
extent, European
yes.
financial systems. Can you
Absolutely,
give?
it's about bribing those systems into their policy. The UK is a good example of that. The United Kingdom, which created the Saudi monarchy, has been receiving endless amount of money over the years and benefiting from that. And that's why the support, the endless support, and almost the ugly support of especially the London governments have been to the Saudi and other Gulf monarchies a shameless support. It's because of the cash that it ends up in their pockets.
So what specific sectors, in particular in the United States and maybe in Britain as well, have the Saudis invested in? And to what extent?
Arms sales is a big area. When a company like Northrop Grumman or British Aeronautics and BAE Systems are selling billions of dollars, tens of, sometimes hundreds of billions of dollars of arms to the Saudi government. These people get a cut of it because they are involved, and they ended up being, sitting on boards, which they get a lot of money for it, and that has been always the way it's done. I remember John McCain, for example, getting $1 million check from Adil al-Jubair for his institute. And what happened? What did John McCain do? He became an ardent supporter and defender of the Saudi monarchy because he got the $1 million for his institute. And that was, that's how they do it. Or, like, if the former ambassador to Saudi Arabia sat on the board of Rayathan, after while he was ambassador, he negotiated the contract between the Saudi government and Rayathan to buy those missiles. And after he left office, he sat on the board and ended up getting, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year just for showing up every month for an hour meeting. That's how it's done. It's really bribery. It's not nothing more than that, and that's why people make these decisions. And if the more staunch supporter they are, if you look at the UK, the former British Prime Minister May, her husband, was sitting on the board of those arms makers who sold Saudi Arabia. That's why she was in support of the Saudi government, and even met MBS after the murder of Jamal Khashoggi shamelessly. So that's how it's done. It has nothing to do with about human rights or rule of law or rule-based systems or whatever. It's really about brutal benefit, financial reward for these politicians.
And in the United States, is there one party in particular that tilts more towards the Saudis out of the Republicans or the Democrats? Or
people think that the Republicans have that greater capacity to basically, because of it's a party that has sort of almost like hostile views toward non-whites, so it's easier for them to ignore the plight of brown people, be it Arab or Muslim or whatever, or blacks. But I cannot distinguish too much between the Obama position with Saudi Arabia and the Trump position in Saudi Arabia. It's very hard. In fact, I think Obama supported the Saudi monarchy at a much greater level than he did than Trump did. And I look at what happened in Egypt in 2013 with the coup and the murders of hundreds of common Egyptian people during the Obama administration, as a good sign. Or the war on Yemen, the Saudi war on Yemen started under the Obama administration with his support, with his close support, even before the war started. We know that the U.S. has supported that, and the invasion of Bahrain by Saudi and Emirati troops was done under the watchful eye of the Obama administration with their support and knowledge, and but it was a quiet support, unlike the way Trump did it. I think Trump was much more open about that. He didn't think that he need to care about the sensitivity of those people in the region. So I don't really see a much distinction between Republican and Democrat. I would have to say that Biden has chosen a little bit slightly different position, and we may see some changes. I don't predict any major change in the policy, but there might be smaller tweaks here and there.
Do you think that's purely in reaction to public opinion shifting?
Absolutely. There is a new pressure from the public. I think the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, even within the apparatus, American apparatus itself, there has been sort of a belief that we need to approach this. Like I was saying, I think Biden has sort of slightly moved away from certain things, but it's not a major departure from previous policies.
It's just rhetorical.
I think there is a lot of rhetoric, but not allowing the Saudi Crown Prince to come to the United States, and the outright rejection for it, as we have seen in this leaked Saudi royal decree. I think that is a departure from previous administrations, but it has not translated yet to a proactive support for change. I do not anticipate, for example, I will wake up one day and I will see the United States pushing the Saudi government or the Al Khalifa regime in Bahrain to create, a new social contract to have much more equitable, like new constitutions for these countries. Although the United States has supported these regimes across the Gulf and against their people, they claim they have no right, or they are not in a position to push them to allow greater freedoms. And of course, this is a BS, because the US is already intervening by supporting these regimes against their people. Forget the commitment for the region, but domestic and regional foes, the US has protected the Gulf regimes from them. And I'm not talking about Iran, I'm talking about from people like myself who wants to have positive change, who want to see the country open up, to see the country less dependent on foreign power and more dependent on its people, allowing its people the rights and freedom, basic rights and freedoms that are available around the world. And I think the US has been a barrier, and the UK has been a greater barrier before the people in that region to attain their rights for freedom of expression, religious freedom, and other human rights, or basic human rights.
Well, can you expand on your own background as a dissident and how it is that you came to be in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I was an activist since a young age. After I was arrested and jailed at the ripe age of 14. So that kind of, even before that, I was an activist, but that kind of was a turning point. And I was active since, really. And after that, I was a target of arrest. So I left the country and I went back again, and I was again, target. So I had to leave the country, and there was no place for me. So I came to the United States, where I continued to be an activist at a young age, and we organized a lot of activities, and I can share some of them with you because we videoed them. Then I decided that is the best way for me to continue my activism is study journalism. And I was the first in my entire region to study journalism, because that was not allowed in Saudi Arabia and it was not available. So I studied journalism in the United States on my own penny. My parents paid for it. And it was unusual for a Saudi to study journalism. Everybody was studying computers or engineering or something like that. So it was an odd choice for me, but I continued to do it. And I think with working with studying journalism, really the eye opened up, and I was able to write and talk. And I moved to DC after graduating, and I from Minnesota, and I continued to work on this, and I established the organization from nothing to continue to work, because I was not able to go back. I was wanted. My brothers were in jail, and so I was not able to go back home. So I had to stay in the United States, and I moved to DC to work on the cases of prisoners, starting with my brothers, and then I decided to use my journalism degree to that effect. And I started writing reports, and and continue to do so for almost 20 years now.
Do you have family who are still in prison?
Yes, my youngest brother.
And how
the
long
same
has he
brother
been?
who was in jail in 1981 as a child, and he's been there for 10 years now.
And
served 17 years.
And on what pretext?
Protesting.
Just protesting.
Yeah, and because he's my brother, so that's another.
So they're also targeted because of their relation.
Yes,
to
absolutely.
you.
Yes, because my nephew served 8 years, and my other brothers, the whole family, in fact, ended up in prison at one time, one point or another. My brother, my oldest brother, he spent 3 years. His children one spent 8, and the oldest son spent 18 months. And over nothing, to be honest. This is the brutality of the Saudi regime, is that they throw people in prison just almost for the heck of it. It's not for really good reasons. It's part to understand how the Saudi regime works. It's not if you do something wrong, they arrest you. That's understandable. It's for them. Arresting people is to terrify the rest of the population. You are there. Let's use you as a poster child of fear, and that's what they do. They say they arrest one and scare 10. Sometimes they kill and torture. Obviously, that's part of the.
And what, I suppose, anecdotes do you call upon when you try to give people a sense of what growing up in Saudi Arabia was like?
It was tough. It was almost you were asked to remove your humanity. You're asked. I remember this sign when I was a kid. It says, "Do not think, we will think for you." They want people, as the Arabic saying goes, like the tied sheep. The only thing you think about is what? Eating. That's it. You have no right to participate, to discuss, to express, to tweet whatever you like, whatever you think, or to give your opinion. That is how the Saudi monarchy think of us as people, that we have no right. We are, to express our opinions, even to say we don't like this, or maybe we should have the. That's why you see now the largest number or percentage of political prisoners in the country's history. It's happened in the past, 5 years now. It is the worst period for human rights in that country.
And were you part of a particularly targeted community?
Well, I am from the oil region and the Shia region of Saudi Arabia, which really received the greatest oppression of the Saudi government. So the Saudi monarchy is genetically is anti-Shia, and they fear the Shia, and they hate and despise the Shia so much. They are not limiting their targeting of the Shia only to their country, but they go all the way to Afghanistan and Malaysia and across the world. There is, in fact, a Saudi program that is, set to basically combat Shia Muslims around the world, be it in DC or, like I said, in Malaysia. They incite, they pay, And what happened a few days in Afghanistan, the killing of 85 high school girls in the bombing, that was Saudi also. There were Saudi hands and other states in targeting the Shia of Afghanistan. And again, that's nothing new. We're used to it. So the Saudi states' hatred of Shia is immense. And I have to say that in my conversation with a senior member of the ruling family, he basically admitted it. And they cannot help themselves but to hate these people. It's just maybe part of their culture. It's part of their political dogma. Who knows exactly why? But the Shia area of Saudi Arabia are the only areas that has seen protesters being executed, killed. The only area of the country that cities have been bombed by the military. The only area that basically incitement of mass murder happened. And the Shia of Saudi Arabia are used, and the Shia of the world are used in the Saudi government, official, religious, and media narrative as a scapegoat for everything. You blame the Shia for everything. There's almost like a Shia blood libel for the Saudis. Anything goes wrong, it's the Shia's fault. They are the one who caused it. Be they in Iraq or in Bahrain, or and now if they want to demonize someone, they call them Shia, like they do it in Yemen. Although Yemenis, there are like maybe 10 to 20,000 Shia in Yemen. They cast the Yemeni opponents as Shia. This is how, because they already have that preset. If you're Shia, you're bad, and you should be mass murdered, and no, you have no sympathies. And in fact, that disease or this phobia has moved on. I've seen an Israeli military spokesman say, using the same logic. So they did not limit it to the Saudi officials, but they moved it to their allies, be in Israel and even in Washington. I've seen it in Washington as well. Americans who have the same repugnant bigotry, and you're talking about think tanks and people in the media who sort of Shia phobia and anti-Shiaism to justify or incite mass murder of civilians.
So in a way, it sounds like the way you've described it is that the Shia are just used as a blanket justification for state repression.
Absolutely. They
in
are,
much
they
the
are
same way that communism was,
yes,
or the fear of communism was used in United States in the Cold War.
Yes, the Red Scare, and now this the Shia scare and Shia phobia. If you're a Shia, you are inherently bad. That's how many, by the way, in the United States, officials, they think that way.
Under the influence of members of the Saudi regime.
Absolutely. Not only the Saudis, but Khalifa regime and others who are also typically anti-Shia. So that's how the reality is that we have seen a huge uptick of that. It's not being anti-Shia is not a big deal in Washington. It's almost like as the Italians say, it's the moda, is the fad now.
So other Shia community, first of all, how a big section of Saudi society are they? And would you say that they are the primary challenge, or I don't know if threat is the right way to describe it?
I don't think they are the primary threat, but the Shia community in the Gulf, but it's, in Saudi Arabia, is the largest Shia community in the Arab world after Iraq. They are larger than the Shia in Lebanon, for example, or Bahrain in sheer numbers. We're talking about nearly 5 million people. And the Shia communities have influenced Shia Islam in Iraq and in Iran. And that's, I think, a long of a story. But this is one of the earliest Shia communities, maybe the earliest, in fact, in history. The area in the east border of Arabia is where the second mosque in Islam was built. And it was one of the earliest, the first region, in fact, before even the Prophet Muhammad went to Medina. This is the first region to willingly accept Islam when Muhammad was in Mecca still, so before his migration. And that continued to carry on that sort of the message that we are independent, we have certain way of thinking. That community, like I said, they live in the richest area in the world. They in the oil area that is now has been pumping oil for 80 years, and they don't get much of it to themselves. It's they get very small amount back, and that gives them special positioning. But at the same time, they are not the one who pose the threat to the regime, because they are not allowed in the military. Their areas are not like mountainous, so they can sort of have rebels there or anything like that. But they are the most annoying to the government. This is where the protests happen. There's no other area in the country there where protest takes place, at least in these large numbers, and for many years, and continues to do so. And this is where the highest per capita political prisoners and people who have been executed, protesters and so on, and most prominent like Sheikh Namr. So this is, the area has been given headache to the regime for that long, and that is nothing new. It's been going for decades, since the first king of Saudi Arabia. That has been the case. And I can tell you, I saw a letter from my grandfather, who died in the 50s, to the king at the time, King Saud, about seizing books belonging to Shia citizens. And my grandfather and others signed a cable to the king saying that, why are you taking the books from the guy? This is basically, his right, his religious freedom and his freedom of thought. So those ideas, those activism from my grandfather, and then his son spent time in jail in the 60s until the 70s, and then his other son spent jail in the 90s. So this is nothing new, and that for the Shia of the country, they led the movement, the protest, they led the movement for workers' union, for taxi. In my fact, my uncle, who was uneducated, was a taxi driver, and he was part of the taxi driver union. So they which was disbanded by the Saudi government. So it's an active area for it's the most active for political activities and activities in terms of the rights and freedoms for all, not only the oil workers had the strikes, and that's most of them were from that area. So this is a long history of activism in that region, gives headache to the regime, but it's far from the centers of power, because they are not in the government, they are not in security and the military or the media. So it's their influence on the state itself is minor vis-a-vis the people in Riyadh or Jeddah.
So what is the primary threat to the Saudi regime as you see it?
The primary threat to Saudi regime is the people in the central region. This is where the power base of the Saudi government is Riyadh and Qasim. So that area I think poses the greatest challenge, security and survival challenge to the throne. And that area is coming along. I think, yes, I say that the Shia in the Eastern province, they have not posed a threat, but more of a headache. But they inspired, I would have to say, despite all those barriers, sectarian and regional barriers, they have inspired young people in that region. And I now see that young people speak of Sheikh Namr as a hero, and to them they were raised with hatred to Shia in general, But Sheikh Namr, I think he crossed that barrier by his sacrifice, by his iconic journey, and it gives people, young people especially, I think, a great example of what they can do. And I think that has been the case. And I have had conversations over the past few weeks, for example, with these young people, and you can see that influence. Even if they don't admit it, the influence is there when they see the voices coming out of protests in Qatif, influencing them even subconsciously to oppose the Saudi regime. And now we have seen increasing voices from that region, from the tribes, that they need to get rid of the Saudi government.
So maybe just for clarity as well, Sheikh Nimr, who you referred to, was a Shia cleric who was executed by the Saudi regime. Yeah.
Yes, he's the top religious cleric in the country who have been killed by the government, Shia or Sunni. So I mean he's So I've written an article after his execution that it's almost haunting, the fact that regimes who kill Shia clerics end up falling very, very bad. I mean, Gaddafi killed Musa Sadr, and look what happened to him. And Mohammed Morsi allowed the horrendous murder of a Shia cleric in Egypt take place, and it didn't take long for him. It's only 6 months after that happened, that state fell. And the same thing with Saddam and others who it's almost, I don't believe in these things, but it's almost like like divine revenge.
So what do you think is the general ideological complexion of the opposition in Saudi Arabia, or is it too fragmented to have a unified vision?
I think the Saudi state has successfully divided the regions of our country, because we have a large country, and we see much more now sort of people getting closer, but we have to admit that there are barriers, regional barriers, and social, tribal and sectarian barriers between the people. They are decreasing because the Saudi state itself cannot be a national state, because it revolves around the one family. So we didn't have national figures to surround, but the sacrifices of Sheikh Namr al-Namr made him somewhat of a national figure. The sacrifices of Dr. Abdullah al-Hamid, who's from Qasim, made him a national figure, and others, prisoners or people who were martyred in the process, they are becoming national figures. So they inspired. Sheikh Namr from Qatif, from Awamiya, inspires people in across the country, and Dr. Abdullah al-Hamid inspires people across the country. Now it's not limited to one region and not to one area. Yes, there is still, the opposition is divided between the Shia and the Sunni, between the Islamists versus not Islamist, or religious. I don't know the use the word Islamist, because I don't think anybody represents Islam, but they represent themselves. So there is sort of a growing coalescence around the idea of a change in the country. Obviously, there are differences of opinions. Should it be violent or not violent? Should it be to replace the monarchy with a republic that is what people call a secular republic, or having a religious regime instead? So some wants what they call a constitutional monarchy. That's a joke, by the way. I don't think there is a constitutional monarchy anywhere. Maybe some European countries, but that's it. Even the UK is not a constitutional monarchy. So that there is people who think this way, and there are some people who said we want. I think it's growing, the idea of its complete removal of the monarchy and anything. Remove the word Saudi. The word de-Saudization has been used, and I think it's probably the only way that can be done correctly is to de-Saudize the country and allow this new generation of people to build a modern, I don't want to use the word secular, but a modern state based on equality for all, based on, and I think even the religious people are coming to this, to accepting this reality that we need to have a state. We are not less than the Americans of 1776 who destroyed or freed themselves from an absolute monarchy and built a republic based on the equality. And I think our people are much more capable than the Americans of 1776 to build a regime that is based on individual rights, that the system is built on individuals, not on party, not on region, not on religion. Everybody has their religion, obviously, and the country's population is basically all Muslim. So that's not an issue of religion, that we don't have to state that the state is a religious state. The religious states are failures, so we shouldn't have that. But we need modern states, and I think that's better. It should be based on equity of citizenship and rights for everyone, no matter where they come from, and access to everyone to politics and wealth of that country. Sovereignty must be protected and so on.
Well, before getting to that point, how secure do you think the Saudi government is in its control of the country?
Right now, it's losing control very quickly, because I think you can say whatever you want about Mohammed bin Salman, but he has made it very easy for the population now to make their choices. And his unstable behavior, his arrogant behavior has made it clear that this is the best way is to just get, really he exposed the true nature of the Saudi monarchy. We are still hearing voices in Washington saying, oh, it's only MBS that's bad, but the Saudi monarchy is really good. And this is, I think of it as a bigoted view, because it's belittling the suffering of people because they are Arabs or Muslims. It is the view in Washington that the Saudi government is good, Saudi monarchy is good. It's just only they have this bad apple that is MBS.
Well, for that reason,
I see it as bigoted. Because belittling the pain and suffering of the people there, because they are Arabs or Muslims, as some blacks in this country. As recent, I've listened to something recently last week that black people don't feel pain. We feel pain, just like you feel pain. We feel suffering. We suffer, like if you suffer because we have a dictatorship. So I think this bigotry should end. This view that these people don't feel pain and they can live, they're used to it. That's supremacy, it's ethnic supremacy, and should really be thrown out.
Well, I wanted to jump in on in about the middle of what you were talking about, because for the reasons that you set out, is there a possibility, do you think, that Mohammed bin Salman might be done away with?
I think it could be. There is a view in Washington and in London, that mostly in Washington, that to secure our control over Saudi Arabia, we need to get Mohammed bin Salman out and get somebody who is, less brutal and much more obedient. Mohammed bin Salman is brutal, but he's not as obedient to Washington as his predecessors. So, and that, I think that's the issue that Washington has had with him, or has having with him. Of course, this leaves the people and their suffering out, and this is unfortunate. We need to make that, and I've said that to American officials in the Biden administration, the people should be in the center of your decision. You should have a happiness indicator. Are the people going to be happy about this? Are they going to be comfortable with this? This is what you should do. You have the right to pursue your interest, like as we have the right to pursue our interest, but people are the constant here. The monarchy is the variable. They will go, like, you know, like the British monarchy once was here. They're not here anymore. And the Saudi monarchy is nothing special. They came and they will go, like everyone else.
And when they do you think that the state within the borders that it currently occupies will continue to exist, or?
I don't see any, why not? You know, I don't see why not. I don't see why not. You know, I think that responsibility falls on us. I'm one of those who believe that borders are not important. People are, because I think the rights of the people, borders are not holy. What is holy are human beings. If these people chose to be on their own, well, you know, it's not the end of the world. Forcing people to live in one country, that is, I think, that's fascist. If they chose to go their own way, that's, you know, I think we have Czechoslovakia. We had Czechoslovakia. We have now two countries, and the earth did not collapse. Yugoslavia and the Soviet Union was once a country, and the UK now we will see Scotland seceding from the UK because of the behavior of sort of what I call English-dominated government in London, ignoring the plight of Scots or the Irish, and it's just natural. You don't have to be of certain race or certain religion to think this way. Human beings are more comfortable in their own surroundings, and they want to be free, especially people who have been oppressed for such a long time. They want to regain control over their destiny, and I think that is much more holy than a border.
Well, we also mentioned at the beginning briefly the state of the war in Yemen. How much of a threat to the royal family do you think that is?
That is a big threat, because the Yemenis are not going to be marching into Riyadh, but what the Yemenis have done, and I have very special, you know, the Yemenis have very special place in my heart, because as a child, these are the people who we saw, the people who built our homes. These are the people who made our sandwiches. These are the people who fixed my car. Yes, they were, you know, as a growing up, I didn't see Indians or Filipinos. I saw Yemenis. So, and they looked like me. They spoke like me. We had the same food. So they are the one I used as a child. I would jump over the school fence to go to the Yemeni convenience store and not eat in school, so he can make me that egg sandwich. That was, you know, so it's like a part of me. And as an Arab from a tribe, I'm a Yemeni, for God's sake, because the Arabs came from Yemen. So I mean, it's very hard to separate that. I have to say that I cannot be an anti-Yemen person. You know, this is who we are. We are Yemenis by origin, but we are in the, you know, Arabian Peninsula was shaped by Yemen. This is where the humanity to the Arabian Peninsula came from thousands of years ago. So it's very hard to separate that. So, but Yemen,
but they're not going to march into Riyadh.
No, they're not going to march in Riyadh. But you know what they will do, or have done already? They have given reason, and I can tell you that there are people in Saudi Arabia, in the government or in the opposition, who supported the Saudi war in Yemen because they were Shia, we have to attack them and so on. Now they have changed their position 180%. They are against the war, okay? Because the war now is threatening the
Quagmire.
survival. It's not only the quagmire, it's threatening the survival of the monarchy. And the American sort of assurances that it will not, I think it will not hold, especially after this, that the Saudi army itself, people in the Saudi military are turning against the war. And typically what happens after, you've seen it in the United States and even in the UK, when an army fails in a war, the officials and the officers turn against their commanders. And we see an increasing evidence that the Saudi military commanders and soldiers and commanders turning against Mohammed bin Salman because he brought them into this war, and they were humiliated in spite of the American, the British, the French, the Canadian, the Spanish, the Italian, the German, the Jordanian, and Somali, and Sudanese, and Senegalese, and everybody else's support. They failed to subjugate the Yemenis. So people's energy and anger is going to be targeted toward Riyadh. So a military coup, a military assassination, or something like that, or military mutiny at least, is going to occur without any doubt, because of what the Yemenis have been able to achieve in spite of all of those sort of backing from Washington to London and Paris and other Western governments who saw this an opportunity to make money and destroy the Middle East even further, so we can benefit here. And because the more houses we destroy in Yemen, the more money is going to come out of Yemen to either London or to Washington, because people, they want to live in peace, so they move. So that has, I think, Yemen, the loser here obviously are the Yemeni people, because so many have died, but it's going to be the Saudi monarchy as well, because they did not succeed, and it was from the beginning. I thought it will never succeed. But now they kind of see it, and maybe it's too late. That I think we can call it the Yemen factor is going to come back to Riyadh, and that earthquake is going to affect the regime itself.
Mm-hmm. And you think that that's ultimately an inevitability?
Well, it's very hard really to say with certainty, but I think if the US kind of lifts its support, because the US has been really a very, very strong supporter, and used its capacity, use its influence, use its spying power, in Bahrain, definitely they did that. The US Fifth Fleet was spying on the protesters and the protest movement, and those arrests happened with the information shared, of course, under the guise of terrorism, because if the Arabs ask for freedom, that's terrorism in the eyes of certain American quarters. So it might be the same. The US and the CIA might successfully protect the monarchy from that fate, but that's why it's important for the US to, and I wrote an article about it, just get out of the way, let people decide. Stop, defending the monarchy and protecting it from its own natural death.
Mm.
It's on life support.
And even if, despite all of that support, the regime were to collapse, what kind of both local but also international repercussions do you think that would have, particularly for the US and the UK, given the amount of Saudi investment and other Arab investment?
Well, I think the country might go through some chaos for a while, and we have to see what the US and the UK especially have done in the other Arab countries where they interfered the post-collapse, like in Egypt or in Libya. So if they stay back and not get involved, I think we'll have the best result. But if they get involved, then we will not have really good outcome, because when an outsider comes into a family house with influence, he's not going to think about their interest. He's going to be think about his own interest, and that's why we saw what happened in Libya and Iraq and in Egypt. The interest of that country is in the hand of its people and should be in the hand of its people. They will figure it out. We are not stupid people. Yes, we have differences, but I think we can make it work. We can build a state that is everybody's happy with, and we have the right to decide our fate. It's not, our fate should not be decided by Washington or London. And I think our biggest hurdle is to convince people or politicians, policymakers in Washington and in London not to interfere in these issues. Hopefully we will succeed.
Mm-hmm. And beyond the Western countries that back the Saudi monarchy, were it to collapse, however that might happen, what kind of implications for the rest of the Islamic world might that have? Because obviously the two most important sacred places are in Saudi Arabia, and they've derived enormous legitimacy or claimed it by being the custodians of these holy places. So how might that change the dynamics in the wider Islamic world?
It will change the dynamics, definitely, depending on the outcome. The change in Saudi Arabia will impact the rest of the world, specifically the Muslim world, because of it's the land of Islam. But that change could go either way, depending on the outcome. If we have a modern state that is looks like Switzerland in its system and equitable and rights and so on, it will advance the Muslim world. It will inspire the rest of the Muslims. If we have a situation like what happened in Egypt, then it's going to be extremely negative. It's going to be worse than what we have with the Saudis. Although I always say there is nothing worse than the Saudi monarchy, but you'll be surprised. You might have a worse than that. So we'll see. I think my reading is that most of the people who are opposing the Saudi government are of the mindset that they need to move forward, not go backward. So hopefully we can succeed in moving forward and making the country better, more equitable, more stable, more free than the current condition.
So if nothing else, it would probably mean the significant international weakening of the kind of schools of thought propagated by the Saudi monarchy.
Absolutely. I think
in other words, the Salafi
Wahhabi, Salafi Wahhabi movement will be weakened. In fact, Salafi, in my opinion, that Salafi Wahhabi had only grew in influence because of all the money that the Saudis have pumped into it, and because of the protection that offered to it. The idea of spreading Wahhabism, Salafism originated in the UK, that the UK wanted to create or support a school that kind of and controls it, and based it in Arabia. That's why they supported the Saudi occupation of Mecca and Medina from the Sharif, because they wanted sort of a dumb version of Islam, extreme version of Islam, because that serves the British Empire. When you think of somebody as an enemy, you want them to be stupid, to be ignorant, to be backward, and that's exactly what happened. That was the British project, and it worked with Saudi Arabia. The Americans came and they continued that project. Islam is much more progressive than that. Islam is much more free than that. And the Saudis have corrupted the mind of maybe hundreds of millions of Muslims, thinking that Islam, because of their position and control of Mecca and Medina, as I always say, that the Saudi monarchy has the pot of gold that is the oil, and the heart of God, that's Mecca and Medina. So we use those to corrupt Islam's understanding of Islam to across the world, to Muslims in America, to Malaysia, to Indonesia, to the end of the earth. And if the Saudi monarchy collapse, that will stop immediately, because the state will not have the capacity to propagate such thing. Because right now, Wahhabi Islam, or the state religion in Saudi Arabia, is Wahhabism. If the state collapses, I don't think that it will be Wahhabism. It might not be any ism. It might be just Islam and that's it. But it will not be a special kind of Islam, or the propagation and spreading of such ideas will stop, and maybe the opposite will happen. The fact that a model will be built on the opposite. I have to say, I'm very pleasantly surprised that many in the Saudi opposition, from typically what you think Wahhabi background, are using Wahhabism as an insult word. They said we have to fight this Wahhabism, and they were born into families that you would typically call Wahhabi, and so we shouldn't be against any religious understanding, no matter how objectionable it is, but separating it from power is important. No strand of religion should control the state. The state should be controlled by people, not by religious ideologies. And hopefully Saudi Arabia will stop being a religious propagator of any kind of religion. People have, I remember writing a letter to the Saudi ambassador at the time, Bender, who was here, saying, our job is not to convert people to Islam. Our job is to build schools, the best schools we can for our kids. Okay, because I didn't go to a good school. I lived I went to school in a rented house. This is where our money should go, not teaching people to become Muslim. That's not our job. That's not our mandate. I don't care if 1,000 Americans became Muslim. If they want to become Muslim, they can pay for it themselves. I don't have to pay for it. So it is, I think there is a change that we need to focus on building our country, rather than sending our money abroad to convert people in Africa or in America to our view of extreme view of the religion. So I think Wahhabism will collapse with the Saudi state. It will be very small, minor. It was always small and minor before the Saudi state. So,
but the money gave it an outsized influence.
And not only the money, British and American support. Because remember, it was the what they called it, the Orthodox Islam, and they embraced it as the Islam that we like. They don't want an Islam that is fighting you back, or a sort of independent Islam that is given. Sort of wants to give power to those nations, independence, be it in Arabia or in Iraq or in Lebanon or Egypt. The idea is, it's okay for the British to use their church lady, the queen, and use but it's not good. It's not okay for the others to do the same. And I'm not an advocate of, again, I'm an advocate of liberating the state from religion and liberating the religion from state, because I think religions belong to the people, and the state has no business in telling people what to believe or not to believe. People can choose that, and the state should just operate as an administration of the people's needs, development and economics and defense and security and so on. Not a religious player whatsoever.
Well, to most, particularly Western people, that basically sounds like the definition of a secular government. Do you think that would have majority support in Saudi Arabia?
I don't call it a secular, because I think the word secular has been corrupted. I call it a modern state. And modern state is very much like a company to me, because maybe I studied management in my graduate school. And I think of us as, as the people of that country. And I think Sheikh Salman Al-Auda, I just saw that a couple of days ago. I was like, this is exactly what I've been saying. And people say, oh, secular. He said it. It's like, we are here in this country as individuals. We share, everybody has an equal share of that state, okay? So like he said, everybody sits on a chair on a table, takes a seat on that table, and everybody has an equal share. We inherited this farm, and everyone has an equal part of that farm. So everyone has exactly the same right as the other. That's how things are. And I think, not to be simplistic, but as individuals, we own part of that country, and we have equal rights like others. So, and that's how I think I envision what I call people's government. And Islam agrees with that, to be honest. Islam agrees with that is exactly what we need to do, is to build a state that is based on equality between the people. And the word people here, I'm not saying Muslims or whatever version of Muslims. In the Quran, it talks about people. It doesn't talk about Muslims. And all those instructions regarding state and sharing and cooperation talks about people. And the people encompasses everyone, Muslims or not, Arabs or not. So I think these are the views, and I hopefully this year I will write my book about it, about the people's government and what inspires these ideas. I think our people are there, because if you talk about religion, which we are a vast country, we have different religious opinion, then nobody will want one area, one part of the world, one part of the country to dominate that interpretation, because we have different schools of thoughts in Islam. There is the Najd, which is more Salafi Wahhabi. There is the East, which is Shia, and the West is more sort of your average Sunni, Sufi, and the South is mixed between Zaydis and Ismailis and Shafi'i and so on. So it is, and the North is much more sort of Shamil oriented. So it's really, I think people will agree that religion should not play the deciding factor in the state. We should, as equal people, share the power and influence of that country as people, as individuals, not as based on our religion or tribe or origin.
Well, I imagine, well, probably, hopefully, everyone listening and watching will completely agree with that sentiment. So I'm sure
I see greater acceptance among the young people, especially. We have a young population, and there is something I call the conversion rate, meaning that the adaptation of young people to new ideas is very high in our country, because we have younger population and people who once thought that religion is the solution. Now they think the religion might be a hindrance. If you install it make it a part of your state apparatus. I think I always said very simply, I say to those people, like I use Sheikh Salman Al-Auda because he's very prominent in the Sunni part of our country. That do you want a Saudi official to tell Sheikh Salman Al-Auda what to do? He said, no. It's like, so if you want the state to decide what religion is, that's what you're doing. You're allowing some young official to tell Salman Al-Auda, this is what you should say on Friday prayer. This is state control of religion. We want Salman Al-Auda to say whatever he wants. Nobody tells him but his conscience what religion is. And I think we should stop controlling religion. Religion, to me, is much more honorable and sacred than state. So it should be left for the person, man or woman, and their God, not a state getting involved in the middle of it.
Well, I'm sure we could continue discussing.
Yeah, I have to go. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say there's, I'm sure, a great many other aspects of Saudi Arabia and where it's heading and what it might look like in the future. But we will probably leave it there. So yeah, on that note, thank you very much again for speaking, and hopefully perhaps when you've had time to write that book, we might be able to speak to you again, and maybe the
Thank you.
situation will have developed further. So
Thank you so much for
again.
having me.